Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping into, well, one of the most debated subjects out there, the relationship between self-defense and the right to bear arms.
Yeah, they often get treated as the same thing, don't they?
Exactly. But the sources we're looking at today, mostly academic and legal analyses, they really insist these two concepts are fundamentally different. Critically different, actually.
And that separation, that's kind of our mission today, isn't it? To untangle them. Because
Yep.
according to these materials, that's the only way you can really build a solid foundation for comprehensive legislation.
Right.
The basic idea we're working with is this: self-defense. That's presented as an inherent fundamental human right. Bearing arms, though, that's argued to be a derivative legal right, an option, even privilege.
Okay, but we have to acknowledge the legal reality first, especially here in the U.S. You just can't discuss this without bringing up District of Columbia v. Heller. That was 2008, U.S. Supreme Court.
The Heller case.
It affirmed an individual's right to own a gun, specifically for self-defense, at least in the home. It was a 5-4 decision, pretty narrow.
And that 5-4 split is significant for you, the listener, because it settled a huge historical debate, at least for now. For ages, people argued if the Second Amendment was about a collective right,
An
militia.
individual.
Exactly. And Heller came down on the side of the individual right, explicitly linking the means bearing arms to the end of self-defense.
But here's where that philosophical line gets really important. If we go with our source materials argument, that bearing arms isn't fundamental like the right to life itself, that it's derivative.
Then it becomes conditional.
Right. And that distinction, that's what gives the legal space to talk about real extensive gun control. If it's derived, it can be regulated.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Fundamental versus derivative.
Yeah.
The sources are really quite clear when they define the right to self-defense. They root it in self-preservation.
Which you can't separate from life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the basics.
The really fundamental stuff.
And the analogy they use is striking, isn't it? They say self-defense is like breathing.
Yeah, like breathing. It's just there. It can't be prohibited. You don't need the government's permission slip to do it. It's basically the right not to be harmed and to stop harm from happening to you.
Okay, but this is where the worldviews really clash, politically speaking.
Absolutely.
Hmm?
You've got one perspective. Sometimes you hear figures like, say, Newt Gingrich mentioned in these analyses, arguing that bearing arms is so essential to making self-defense possible.
That it has to be a human right, too.
Pretty much. That denying the means is denying the right itself.
But then there's the other side, which our sources focus on heavily. Thinkers like S.E. Smith, writing in The Guardian, for example, they argue, no, owning guns is definitively not a human right.
And the reasoning.
Well, because the gun is just the tool, the mechanism. If self-defense is the fundamental right, the specific type of weapon you use doesn't change the nature of that right.
Exactly. So the conclusion from these sources is pretty consistent. The right to bear arms is a man-made right. It stems from the fundamental right, okay, yes, but it needs de jure recognition,
Meaning?
meaning it has to be written down in law, legally sanctioned, codified, regulated by the government. It depends on the state saying, okay, we recognize this particular method.
Let's go back to that analogy. It helps it stick. The right to move freely, that's fundamental, right? You can walk around.
Generally, yeah. A human right.
But driving a car, that's a legal right. It's derived. You need a license, insurance, training.
And the state can take it away if you mess up.
Right. So self-defense is the walking, bearing arms is the driving. One's inherent, the other's a granted privilege that comes with rules. Okay, so we've drawn that line. Fundamental right versus legal mechanism. The next thing the sources dig into is, well, why? Why are guns so tightly linked to self-defense that people just lump them together all the time?
Yeah, why the confusion? It seems to boil down to two big ideas: efficacy and, frankly, distrust.
Distrust of what?
Distrust that anyone else can protect you. The sources talk about this core belief that self-preservation is just too vital to hand over completely to outside forces, like the police or the government. When it comes down to it, your first line of defense, maybe your only line.
And the efficacy part.
Yeah, it's just brutally practical in these analyses. Guns are often presented as the simplest, most reliable way to stop a threat fast, especially when there's a big physical difference between the attacker and the person defending themselves.
It's not about morality at that point. It's about survival tactics when other options like running away or talking things down are gone.
Precisely. And that leads us straight into that phrase you always hear, the gun as the great equalizer.
Right, the equalizer.
Think about what that implies. The sources explain it as leveling the playing field. A firearm can make someone who is physically weaker, maybe elderly or disabled, or a smaller person attacked by someone much larger, suddenly equal in their ability to stop the attack.
So that idea that the means of defense have to be effective enough to actually guarantee the fundamental right to life is protected, that's what gives bearing arms its legal standing as a derivative right.
Exactly. It's seen in these arguments as the tool most likely to work when the state can't be there in that split second.
Hmm.
And accepting that it's derivative, that's the key that unlocks the door to Section 3 in our sources, comprehensive regulation. If it were fundamental, like breathing, how could you regulate it?
You couldn't, really.
But before we get into the pillars of how you regulate it, we need to be super clear about what gun control can't do.
This is really important for you, the listener. Gun control laws can aim to reduce gun violence, sure, but they absolutely cannot, legally or ethically, stop someone from using lethal force if their life is truly on the line and they genuinely cannot escape or retreat.
The source material is really strong on this. If you are forced into that corner, that life or death moment, you can't be convicted of murder for defending yourself, even if, say, you didn't have the right license for the gun you used.
Wait, really? Even without a license?
In that specific extreme circumstance, yes. The fundamental right to self-defense overrides the licensing rule for possession in that moment. The license is about owning and carrying, not about the act of defending your life itself when all else fails.
Okay, that's a critical distinction. So because bearing arms is a legal right, it's what the sources call an imperfect right. It has to be granted and therefore regulated to protect everyone else and prevent that power imbalance we mentioned. And the sources sketch out a pretty detailed legislative framework. We can break it down into, let's say, 4 key pillars for you.
Okay, pillar number 1, defining ownership. This isn't just about background checks. It's about figuring out who is mentally and ethically suitable to have a gun. And crucially, defining why they can have it, usually focused on self-defense at home or maybe during travel.
Makes sense. Pillar 2.
Controlling quantity and quality. This means laws limiting the types and power of weapons allowed for civilian self-defense. Asking if certain firearms are clearly designed for military combat rather than protecting yourself from a home invader.
The goal being?
The goal, as the sources put it, is restricting any unnecessary stockpile of arms that could let one individual have power over others in society. If it's purely a weapon of war, it arguably falls outside the self-defense justification for individual ownership.
Okay. Pillar 3.
Regulating use. This tackles the tricky areas, like stand your ground laws. If self-defense is about saving your life when you can't retreat, the rules need to be crystal clear about when lethal force is okay.
And when it's not.
Absolutely. It has to stop self-defense being used as an excuse for revenge or, escalating a situation unnecessarily.
Got it. And the 4th pillar loops back to that car analogy, right?
Exactly. Licensing and accountability. This argues licenses shouldn't be forever, they should be renewable. It calls for mandatory training like driver's ed covering safety, laws, ethics.
And insurance.
Yeah, the sources recommend mandatory liability insurance, treating the gun like any other potentially dangerous property that could cause harm through misuse or accident.
And what about getting rid of guns?
Good point. That falls under accountability too. Strict rules for disposal. Since the state grants the privilege, you shouldn't just be able to will it or give it to someone who hasn't passed the same strict checks. The state needs to track the transfer.
Okay, this leads us right into the boundaries of self-defense itself, which is Section 4 in the sources. We've established defending life. But what about using that derivative right to arms to defend, say, liberty or property? This is where it gets complex, right?
Oh, absolutely. The sources definitely wade into that. You see clear lines sometimes, like with the Castle Doctrine.
The idea that your home is your castle.
Exactly. You can generally use lethal force against someone breaking in because that inherently feels like a threat to life. But what about, say, someone stealing your car from the driveway? Is lethal force okay then? Or defending purely financial assets? It gets murky fast.
And this is crucial. The sources really hammer home the difference between a citizen acting in self-defense and the state's authority. Owning a gun for protection does not make you a police officer.
Not at all. You can't chase down a fleeing burglar and shoot them. You can't use lethal force just because someone's being offensive or disruptive. Punishment. That's for the government, after a proper trial.
So any use of force outside that immediate, unavoidable threat to life, that has to be punishable.
Yes, and it leads to the absolute necessity of a trial. Any killing where someone claims self-defense, even if it seems totally justified, must go through the legal process immediately afterward.
It's not just theoretical, is it? There was that case, Mrs. Bessie Jones, back in '93.
Right, the 92-year-old woman who shot an intruder.
She was acquitted, wasn't she? Because it was clearly self-defense.
Yes, she was. But the key point is, she still had to stand trial. It shows that even if you're ultimately found justified, maybe even without the perfect license like we discussed, the trial itself is mandatory. It ensures it wasn't murder pretending to be self-defense.
And then there's the final, really complex political question the sources mention legislation often struggles with.
Ah, yes. The whole Second Amendment context about tyranny.
Does the right to bear arms also cover using them against your own government if it becomes tyrannical? That's a whole other layer, protecting people from the state itself, not just from criminals. It's the toughest scenario for any regulations to handle.
So let's try and wrap this up. What are the main things for you, the listener, to take away from this deep dive?
Okay. The core distinction, self-defense. That's the fundamental perfect right. It's inherent. You can enforce it yourself in the moment. Everyone recognizes it. You're allowed to defend yourself, period.
But bearing arms? That's presented as a legal, imperfect right. The state recognizes it, grants it, but can't enforce it. They can't make you own a gun.
It's an option, a privilege. And because it's granted by the state.
It must be regulated. Comprehensively, carefully, under the law. That's the logic.
And let's finish with that philosophical thought from the sources, the idea of alterity.
Right. Seeing the other in each person, the sources kind of hold out this ideal. The day we see each in each other, we will have no need for guns. It's aspirational, obviously.
But it connects back to that core reason for arms we talked about, efficacy. If bearing arms is justified because it's currently seen as the most effective way to defend your life against immediate danger,
then it raises a final question for you to think about. What level of societal trust and actual communal protection would we need to reach?
Whether that's through better policing, stronger communities, maybe even new technologies for non-lethal defense.
What would it take for the derivative right to bear arms to become genuinely, well, outdated? Replaced by means that are just as effective at saving lives, but maybe less inherently dangerous overall.
Something to consider. That's all for this deep dive.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.